Um, okay. Thanks for joining us today on KRTD News, which we do every Friday. For the first time, we have Joseph Evans with us today, former Idaho Green Party, Idaho Libertarian Party congressional candidate. Sorry, I'm a little tired today.
It's all right,
I,
Shane. We're
all
doing
right,
good.
definitely. So we're gonna be we have a great show. We got a few different stories. Talk a little about the expansion of the war effort, marijuana legalizations facing challenges, and then another issue with the police with a 9-year-old girl. We have so many of those lately. So we're gonna get started now. So let's take a look. If you want to go ahead first and do the first take.
Okay, absolutely, Shane. So we've been paying attention to the news that's going on with the Biden White House and his foreign policy. Right now, they've placed a big effort on moving more troops back into the Middle East, increasing Clinton era level troops in Afghanistan and Iraq. Looks like they're preparing, staging for possible altercations with Iran based on the way we're mobilizing troops in the Middle East right now. Now, as much as we're paying attention to what's going on in the Middle East, the way the federal government's moving troops into and out of, well, all over the world right now, looking for more and more conflict, especially with the appointment of General Lloyd Austin to the Secretary of Defense position, former representative lobbyist for Lockheed Martin. That represents a definite show of military effort, military industrial complex placing more and more emphasis in the role in the United States government, in our current administration. And several peace activist groups across the United States are actually mobilizing to try and counter that. One of those also includes groups like BringOurTroopsHome.us. Dan McKnight's been fairly interested. He's been a strong advocate, not only for bringing our troops home and ending the forever wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, but also defending the Guard. One of the issues we've recently had here in the state of Idaho was legislative measures to one of our local representatives, Ben Adams, put forth a measure to, well, it was a Defend the Guard bill. And in an effort to defend the Guard, what he wanted to do was create legislation that the state governors could no longer allow the federal government to use National Guardsmen in order to conduct military operations other than war outside of the United States without a congressional declaration of war. Now, these legislative measures at the state level in order to affect foreign policy have largely been shot down because of money. Several legislators have gotten in the way because using National Guard troops to augment federal troops in unconstitutional wars pays the state bills. They've essentially sold Idaho Guardsmen to cover expenses at the state level. Now, Idaho is just one of the most recent to basically show their true colors on this. What do you think, Shane?
I think that we're seeing the same thing we've seen in the last few administrations. We always, no matter what happens, you're promised to change, or you're promised no change in the case of Joe Biden, which he literally said nothing will fundamentally change. And he's right. We're seeing the same types of things with foreign policy that, I mean, it's slightly different with every president, but the key word is slightly. We're seeing an aggressive foreign policy is what we've seen for a very long time. We've seen that with a little bit with Trump. We've seen that with Trump. We've seen that with Obama. We've seen that with Clinton, but especially with Bush. But we've seen that for so many years. It's the same thing. We're not going to see anything different in this administration regarding foreign policy. I can expect we're going to possibly what he might do is what Obama did and say he's going to take troops out of somewhere and just move them around and then move them back later. I think that's what we're going to continue to see. So I don't think anything's going to change. I think this is pretty much what I expected with the Joe Biden presidency. I expected an aggressive foreign policy because he thinks he's colonialism and he thinks he's a world builder and all that other stuff. So I'm not surprised at all, and I definitely think that it's the wrong approach to foreign policy, 100%. I think there are several better ones, but this is what we got stuck with, unfortunately.
It's interesting, especially when we come back to the fact that Joe Biden's been involved in the war effort and a strong supporter of the military-industrial complex and colonialism or colonization, however you want to phrase it, ever since he went into politics. You know, he supported the Gulf War. He supported 2001. He supported the invasion of Iraq. He's been, along with other members, John McCain comes to mind, very pro-military adventurism. Let's go ahead and use that word, military adventurism. This Congress very much likes it. They continue to support it. Biden as a senator, Biden as vice president, now Biden as president continues to see the U.S. as a leader where we go in and we don't ask people what we can do to help them. We point our military at them and say they will do it our way. And that's unfortunately been a very prevalent attitude in the way Joe Biden has approached an awful lot of problems that he's tried to address in the United States in his role as senator over the years, with regards to race relations here in the United States. I believe he's even been caught quoting, "I know what's best for the Negro."
Correct.
Yeah, this is a common attitude. This is who Joe Biden is. And we really have to accept that if we're going to be able to address the issues that are going to come out of this administration over the next few years.
Definitely. I can definitely see. The other thing is the U.S. will be told to leave and will ignore them. Like, this was under the Trump administration, but Iraq actually said, "Can you please get out of here?" And we just said, "No, thank you. We're good."
Yeah.
I can see us continuing to do things like that under the Biden administration. So it's the same administration with a different face, in a sense.
Right. A return to the Obama era military industrial complex. And that's one of the things. While we had Secretary Clinton, the first 4 years, we expanded the war on terror from not just Iraq and Afghanistan as Bush had created it initially. We added 5 more countries at the time to the war on terror. Now, post-Secretary Clinton, we managed to contain it to the 7. I believe it was Yemen, Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, Syria, and Libya. And those were the 7 that we were involved in at the time. Trump, even though he increased the amount of munitions that was being spent in support of those 7 wars, he never actually successfully got us out of those arenas. Matter of fact, continued weapon sales to Israel, Saudi Arabia, and several other Middle Eastern countries.
The funny thing about it was Trump would tweet. I don't know if everybody remembers this. Trump would tweet, "It's time to get out of Iraq!" ! And then we wouldn't do anything. So you're the president of the United States. When you are the president of the United States, you're the commander in chief, and you can actually end that war if you really want to, end the invasion or whatever you want to call it of Iraq. You can end that in a second if you were serious about doing it. And Obama wasn't serious. He campaigned on ending the wars. Trump tweeted about it, but nobody seems to be serious about doing it.
Right. So Jay Manning comes up on chat. It's shuffling the playing board. Trump did it. He moved people out of Iraq. He moved people out of Afghanistan. He moved people out of Germany. He never actually moved troops. He never actually brought the troops back home. You know, every so often we'd have a parade for a unit that would redeploy back to the States. The things they kept hiding was the fact that there was always a unit replacing them somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
For every troop that came home, there was a troop that went back to the Middle East. For every troop that came home, you know, that left Germany, there was a troop that went into Poland. You know, all we did was a shell game with the troops. We moved them here, we moved them there. We never actually did what we were told was being done with the troops, especially from Trump's tweets.
No,
Yeah,
exactly.
and it's just going to continue to accelerate under Biden.
And that's a common trick. We've seen Obama do that same trick. We're taking 5,000 troops out of Iraq, he'll say. But then he wouldn't tell us what he's actually doing with those troops. They'd pop up somewhere else. And Trump did the same thing. I can definitely see Biden pulling those tricks as well.
Well, that's interesting that you take a look at that. Reason why is I don't think Biden's even going to bother hiding the fact that he's ramping up the war effort. I fully expect him to announce surges to support the war on terror in the Middle East. Yeah. And he's not going to say we're bringing troops home. He has no interest. Everybody knows he's a wartime president now. Well, he was a wartime vice president too. So he's just extending, the status quo. He saw troop surges under Bush, which he advised for as a senator. He saw troop surges under Obama, which he advised for as a vice president. I honestly expect that as president, Joe Biden will continue to move troops out in support, and he'll move National Guardsmen out to support those operations around the world. We will see Idaho National Guardsmen in combat operations probably before the year is out, and probably in a brand new war.
Definitely. Yeah. I definitely think we're going to see him more aggressive. I think I saw an article about him talking about bringing back the war on terror in a big way or something to that effect. So you're probably right. He's not going to use these tricks. He's just going to be extremely open about it, likely. Be like, we're expanding the war on terror, and I'm going to send more troops here, here, and here. And he's just going to go out and say it.
So one of the big questions about this, we know how the war in Afghanistan started. We created a precedence for invasion of Afghanistan based on the Twin Towers when they fell. Iraq, we used a humanitarian justification and weapons of mass destruction in order to justify that one. The next 5 wars that followed after that under Obama, it's like we didn't even bother announcing them at the time. So the question is under a Biden administration, will we just go ahead and increase the war effort, go ahead and increase military combat operations in more countries than the ones we currently occupy? Or are we going to see a false flag event in an effort to justify the invasion of one of these countries?
They've always been good at justification. If you try hard enough, you can always find a way to make it look like we're doing the right thing. If you try hard enough, you'll find that there's a reason for it. There's a higher purpose, whatever it is. You can find that. You can claim that, and it's very easy to make that lie look real. And we've done it so many times before.
Right, and it's going to be interesting though, because we've seen it. Most of us have lived through these false flags now. We've lived through the false justifications for combat operations against, that we've used to justify dropping $100,000 missiles on people who live on $1 tents, who survive on $5 a year income in the Middle East, in order to maintain the kind of operational tempo, the supply and demand, the purchase requirements in order to sustain these operations, the amount of spending we invest in Lockheed Martin, in Boeing, and a number of these other companies, in order to maintain the operations. Trump was one of those that was good about it. As much as we saw the increase in operations under Afghanistan, Trump was very good about concealing the amount of munitions that we spent, the amount of bombs that we dropped, and for that matter, where we dropped them as well. So it's going to be interesting to see just where we proceed from here. That said, one of the things I project over the next couple of years, increase in op tempo, we'll see an invasion of at least one major. Now, I take that back. It's not going to be a major country. As much as the military industrial complex would like to take on Iran at this point, and as well positioned as we are as far as military placement, I think they see that as a bridge too far with the current population and where we are with our anti-war sentiment. However, we do have several operations going on in Africa right now, several of them where there are insurgencies for us to go in and support counterinsurgency operations. So we will definitely see more troops deployed to counter terrorism, as we like to call it.
Yes, terrorism.
Around the world.
I actually disagree. I think we're going to invade. I think there's a stronger possibility we're going to go into Iran, because I've learned one thing about the government since I've been looking at them. They honestly don't care what people think a lot of the time. They will do something and they'll ignore you. They have zero problem doing that. If they want to invade Iran, if enough donors come from like all these war places like Lockheed Martin and all these other places come in and give them enough money, and they want Iran invaded, we're going to do what they tell us. Joe Biden got some of the most, like Joe Biden himself, I believe one of his cabinet members, like you said, is something to do with Lockheed Martin. And then Joe Biden was given a lot of money. And Joe Biden is the type of guy, if a bunch of people are donating to the Democratic Party,
Yes.
a bunch of from the war who want this war, if they donate enough money, he'll say, yes, sir, we will go into Iran. Of course, sir.
The interesting thing with that is the situation in Iran. Okay, Iran is actually a world-class military. Regardless of how we talk about them, yes, we outmatch them technologically. We outmatch them with training. We have better equipment. However, we are going to lose troops. I'm wondering whether or not the United States Congress and whether or not the Joe Biden administration will be able to successfully justify the death of 20,000 servicemen in an effort to secure whatever it is we're going into Iran for. That's really what the debate is. Can they find a means to justify the death of excess of 20,000 American service members, of which probably a quarter will include National Guardsmen, by the time we complete that particular never-ending war? Reason why is because this is another one. It's going to last another 20 years. We've been in Afghanistan 20 years. We've been in Iraq 18. We've been in Syria close to, 12 now, in some capacity or another. We will be in Iran for 20 years. We will involve another troop surge that will involve placement of National Guardsmen, citizen soldiers who enlisted in order to help their community in their state, are going to be sent to kill and die in a foreign nation, complete with troop surges, for the next 20 years in order to maintain and secure the ground that we go in and take from Iran. Can they justify that?
Yeah. If they're able, the thing is, I think if they can find the justification, and if they get enough donations from Raytheon and these other lobbying companies, they will do it if they're told to, and they can find a way to justify it. I wouldn't put it past them, is what I'm saying. I'm saying if there's not enough money coming through, or if they can't find a way to justify it, I don't know if they'll be able to pull it off. It's kind of what I'm saying.
Fair enough. Tell you what.
Let's go on.
I'm going to give you a 1 in 3.
Sure.
3-1. 25 to 75% chance. That's what, 1 in 4? Mm-hmm. 1 in 4 chance that they will find a means to actually justify the invasion of Iran sometime over the next 4 years. It's my personal opinion at this. I don't think they'll go there, but, the possibility does exist.
the Trump administration did try on the way out, if you remember, the Secretary of State trying to link them to Al Qaeda or something like that. Even though I don't remember the specifics, but in the Middle East, those two religions that they are the religion of Al Qaeda and the religion
Shia and
of,
Sunni.
yeah, they don't get along, and they're more enemies to each other than they are to the United States.
Well, that's true, but that was one of the things about the Iraq invasion. I believe the Shia were the minority and the Sunni were the majority. The Saddam Hussein administration was actually made up of the minority. So they were in a position where they still had to create a situation where the majority felt comfortable. However, the minority were protected because the minority were the ruling class at the time. So that's one of the situations. Now, despite the fact that Khomeini is a religious leader, Iran is still largely a secular government. You know, they handle things through elections, through voting. You know, the Quran is not the end all be all of Iranian law. So again, it's going to be interesting. You can't tie the government. Who was it? Soleimani that was assassinated by Trump with a bomb. God, that was a year ago now. You know, that was a provocation that should have kicked off war with Iran. You know, it was justified for Iran to retaliate under international law because of the way President Trump conducted the operation. It's going to be interesting to see how much provocation Joe Biden's going to be able to send that way without looking worse than Trump with random political assassinations.
Definitely true. And I just want to say, if that was our general, if Iran did that to our top general, we would be in a war with them right now. Like
in a heartbeat. You know, if they had found a way to drop a missile on General Lloyd Austin, let's go ahead and use him since he's very prominent right now. You know, he's currently SecDef. He was in command of forces in Afghanistan. He was command of forces in CENTCOM. You know, the man's fairly well respected across the U.S. military. You know, not quite up there with Mad Dog Mattis, but he's definitely up there, well respected. If they'd found a way to drop a missile on him, you know, we would have 4 carrier fleets with constant sorties of F-35s and F-15s dropping bombs all across Iran yesterday.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
All right, let's get to the next story. So I'm gonna let you do the first take on this one as well, and then, yeah.
Okay, so right now across the United States, marijuana legalization is facing constitutional challenges. We are down to like 2 or 3 states where marijuana is still completely illegal according to state regulations and state laws. Iraq happens to, I'm still stuck on the last story. Idaho and I believe North Dakota. Governor Kristi Noem. North Dakota recently passed a ballot initiative, of all things. People voted. People said, we want medical marijuana in our state. Kristi Noem came in and said, yeah, no, I'm going to challenge that. My attorney general is going to take it to the Supreme Court and say that ballot initiative was unconstitutionally submitted, therefore ruled null and void, regardless of what the people want. And it turns out that there's actually a significant amount of nepotism that's associated with that. Kristi Noem's husband happens to sell crop insurance. Right? Now, the thing is with crop insurance is you can't actually insure crops that are on the FDA controlled substance list. So while it's recognized as a cash crop, and an awful lot of farmers willingly go over to hemp and or marijuana in order to supplement, they can't insure those crops. Therefore, Kristi Noem's husband, who is a crop insurance salesman, can't make money off of insuring crops. that the farmers are growing in North Dakota. Now, you currently have other situations. Idaho State Senate just passed legislation for constitutional amendment instituting prohibition. Okay, now they did some funny things with the wording, but when you say FDA approved medication for a plant, most people understand that the FDA will never approve that. Reason why is because there's no corporation who's going to spend $500,000 getting a efficacy, is that what it is? Efficacy study done on the medical value of marijuana when there's no way for them to actually go in and patent the medication that's patent the use of marijuana, which anybody can grow. Mm-hmm. Okay, so even though we say FDA approved uses, it's never going to happen. Nobody's going to spend the $500,000 if they can't make the money back. Now, this happens to be a constitutional amendment. Fortunate thing is since we originally were looking at doing this, it appears as though the senator who put that forward will not be continuing with his unconstitutional constitutional amendment. Right. Now, this particular approach goes clear back to Prohibition. 1920s, we passed 18th Amendment here in the United States. U.S. Constitution, 18th, we made alcohol illegal across the entirety of the United States. 13 years later, we passed the 21st Amendment, which repealed the 18th Amendment. Apparently, prohibition doesn't work. Now, they've been fairly fortunate with maintaining the prohibition against marijuana for, well, in Idaho's case, 93 years now. First prohibition was back in 1927. And now it's just been illegal on the books. They haven't actually gone as far as trying to make it a constitutional prohibition like we did in the United States with the 18th Amendment. But that's one of the things that we've done with the combination of the Drug Enforcement Agency, the DEA, and the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, in order to maintain the illegality of a number of drugs, which can be grown, including marijuana, psilocybin, and several other forms. Another one that's come up that may find itself under regulation is kratom. Now, these controlled substances, or soon to be controlled substances in some case, anybody can grow them, anybody can package them, anybody can sell them, which is the reason why corporations are interested in controlling the flow of the money. If they can prevent you from growing opium so that you can make your own heroin and morphine, we've done a pretty good job of that over the years. Fentanyl. Current market, fentanyl's proven to be deadly. We're getting an awful lot of street drugs that have been cut with fentanyl in order to improve. So we see opioid overdoses across the United States as a result of this. Now, marijuana is one of the few drugs out there where an overdose isn't fatal. Right? Here we got a drug that can actually treat addictions of fatal use drugs like morphine, fentanyl, a number of others, and it's still prohibited. Continues to be a problem. Now, one of the reasons we look at this is states like Oregon and more recently Washington have decriminalized personal use, possession quantities of these drugs. So you can carry around a small amount of meth with you on the streets in Oregon, and the police can't harass you over it. Same with psilocybin, marijuana, cocaine, heroin even. So, all of those who are familiar with the Seattle night scene, all of the heroin junkies up on Pike Street Marketplace after the sun goes down. I've actually walked those streets. It's not as bad as they like to make it out to be, but it definitely is an interesting view. Pioneer Square up in Seattle. Haven't witnessed after nightfall in Portland myself. Seattle itself is indeed a view, though. It's one of those things I'm interested in seeing how these things continue to affect. Idaho likes to call themselves the last foxhole, as in we are literally the only state right now that hasn't legalized marijuana in some capacity. There are people within the state who want to maintain that position, who want to continue to believe in that, and fight for the morality of the state. But it turns Idaho into a dry state around states that are currently issuing. Okay, sorry about that. That are currently issuing no that have decriminalized personal possession. What do you think, Shane?
So, I think a lot of people are not going to remember this because nobody was born at this time, but marijuana actually used to be an export of the 13 colonies back before we were even the United States. That actually used to be one of our exports to Britain. And for whatever reason, it became illegal over the years. I have no idea what led to that. And you also mentioned the prohibition of alcohol. The United States will try to make something illegal. And then the people say, actually, no, I actually kind of want that. And eventually they'll be like, all right, fine. And in the end, it's going to become legal. But you can see by that map we had up on the, I want to show that map again. I want to show the map again. We could pull that up. It looks like we only have, currently, I don't see it.
Okay, that map does look a little bit dated as far as the CBD laws now.
That might be the
case. North Dakota represented one with Kristi Noem. Idaho was the last gray state where it was completely illegal in all shapes and forms. Technically, we sell CBD oil here in the state of Idaho, despite the fact that it is a hemp product and is considered illegal unless it's able to get below a 0.03% THC level, which, come on, let's admit it, there isn't a CBD producer these days that's going to bother refining it to that level. Reason why is because if they do, it's a loss of money in sales. Sales across the United States in order to compete in the market. If they spend the extra time in order to strain out that last little bit, they lose the value of the profit with selling. So we are literally selling illegal CBD oil here in the state of Idaho because it's the only kind of CBD we can get.
Interesting. And Congress, I believe we keep hearing about legalization of marijuana. Congress did something recently, I believe, something that they said the states could do it. I'm not even sure if that passed. There have been people throughout state governments and the federal government all across the country for the last 10 or 15 years saying, what if we legalized marijuana? And nothing bad's going to happen, really. So I think that we're on the right track. It's unfortunate that what happened in Idaho, that the people said, we want marijuana legalized, and they said, no, actually, you can't have that. And it's very possible we'll see that in some other states as well. But I think this is going to end the same way the prohibition of alcohol did in the end, because there's no way they can fight progress like this for that long. Eventually, the state governments and the federal government are going to say, okay, fine, you can have your weed. It's not worth it anymore.
It's actually interesting because if you go back and you take a look at history, 1933 was the year that Idaho actually became a state. Now, when we went in and we actually created the Idaho Constitution, we were still looking at a very strong and robust Republican Party at the time that had just come off of, the temperance movement. Okay, so we were still looking at, now I got my years wrong on that, but that's beside the point. The temperance movement was very strong at the founding of the state. And the big thing with the temperance movement, even though it was about prohibition or made to be about prohibition, the temperance movement was actually about violence against women and children. Okay, the Christian Women's Temperance Union was the primary leader, and they did two things. They were focusing on women's rights, women's suffrage, as well as safety for women in the home. Now, the thing with alcohol was it was available. The husbands would go out, get drunk, they'd spend all their money drinking, come home broke, family would be starving. So that was the big issue with the temperance movement at the time. And the Republicans had adopted that, how good governance was responsible for the sobriety and the temperance of the community.
Interesting.
Right? Now, the thing is, you step back and you go, well, what about the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? You know, I like drinking. Drinking makes me happy. I like smoking. Smoking makes me happy. Should be allowed to pursue that happiness. The interesting thing is the government stepped in and said, well, yeah, you can be happy. Just don't abuse the privilege. Except then we ended up with legislation across the United States that ended up as the 18th Amendment that said, no, we don't trust you to just be happy because we feel that you're going to abuse the privilege of being happy. And we're just going to ban alcohol. You can't go out and you can't drink. You know, you can't go out to the speakeasies without risking being poisoned by federal agents who sell bad whiskey. And they went through that for about 13 years. However, we still see an awful lot of that in existence in governance today, especially out west and down south, where the temperance union still shows a degree of influence in the way we govern, particularly with the right to the pursuit of happiness. Now,
I want to respond to that a little bit. I think the government should have more to worry about than whether I'm having a glass of alcohol or some weed. I don't think they should. I think they have better things to do, and there are other problems they could be working on than thinking, are these people drinking or are they high? They have much better things to be doing than that. I personally think. I think they can spend their time doing something more productive than worrying about who's high.
Except there's one thing about that. And this goes back to Biden again. So 1994 Biden, he passed the criminalization, one of his tough on crime bills. Okay, so that was a modern crime bill, 1994. He passed it, the 3 strikes law, and a number of others. And one of the interesting things about this is we go back to the 13th Amendment, which was a post-Civil War repackaging of slavery. We no longer allowed private citizens to hold slaves. We turned that over to the role of government. And slavery was handed over, was an acceptable punishment for violating the laws. It was interesting how many laws immediately sprung up that had nothing to do with hurting other people or stealing their stuff. Yeah, it continues to get bad after that point where we continue. But the thing about the 1994 crime bill was it actually restored profitability of the modern slave trade. We were able to start sending people to prison, where they in turn either had to work on prison farms or in some other capacity. So right now we actually have a work release program here in the state of Idaho that allows prisoners to go out and work in slaughterhouses and meat processing plants. Right? Now, if this were a union job in any other state, you'd be looking at $45, $50 in order for this particular career choice of an individual to go out and do. As a prisoner, they actually pay better than prison wages, but it's nowhere near union wages. Matter of fact, it's I believe I've been told it's somewhere around $17, $18 an hour for a prisoner to work in these places. This doesn't actually pay what it costs the state of Idaho to house any of these particular prisons. And most of this money does go to restitution for crimes they supposedly committed. But we have literally repackaged slavery with the 13th Amendment. The crime bill continues to do that. Now, you look at states where there is a high per capita prisoner rate. Okay, Louisiana was one of them that was really bad for a while. You know, you take a look at how that continues to exist, and the fact that there is an imbalance in the way that these laws are enforced. You know, we spend an awful lot of time talking about institutional racism. Okay, how certain demographics find themselves involved in the justice system, in the wrong side of the justice system, more often than others.
Definitely. Now, in regards to what you were saying about slavery, I want to basically plug one of the guests we had on our show last night, Mark Charles. Look into him, everybody. He talked a lot about how in the Constitution, or rather in some of our documents, we still allow slavery in certain ways when he was running for president, and he wanted to bring attention to that. So anybody interested in learning more about that and wanting to get rid of that, look into Mark Charles. So
Mark Charles is absolutely an astounding individual. I had an opportunity to look into him while he was running for president. He was one of the independents that you never really saw too much of because he insisted on running as an independent. As an indigenous person running for the highest office in the world, or highest office in the United States, he definitely had a lot of ground to cover in trying to get his name out. He does speak an awful lot about the colonizer trauma that's become part of the United States landscape, both political, social, cultural, and the way we interact with indigenous people, as well as Blacks and other persons of color across the United States. Now, Mark Charles has definitely done his time working with the cultures that are still reservation bound. And that's one of the things that you're looking at as far as the differences in culture and the way they interact. You have the indigenous Americans that are still living on the reservations. You have the indigenous Americans that have stepped off of the reservations to become part of the communities across the United States. You see them in the major cities, you see them in rural areas, and a resurgence of that culture. Mark Charles has gone a long ways in bringing awareness to that. Definitely anybody who's looking into race relations in the United States needs to step back, take a look at the Mark Charles story, get involved with what he's doing. Now, true, he's not necessarily libertarian in mindset, but at this point, one of the things I've noticed about an awful lot of the Black and Indigenous and people of color across the United States, especially as far as community leaders go, they do understand more of an anarchic view where we need to deconstruct a lot of the institutions that continue to maintain and that continue to maintain the institutional racism across the United States.
definitely. Now let's get to the next story, which will be the last story of the show. I'm gonna do the first take on this one. Okay, so for whatever reason I cannot see it, I'm going to let you start on this take. I'm going to leave the meeting, come back, and
so not that long ago, there was a 9-year-old girl who was pepper sprayed by an officer. Now, officers were called to the home, being notified that the 9-year-old girl was suicidal and depressed. And they were told that she had indicated she is going to harm herself, which tends to happen, as well as intent on harming her mother, who she lived with. Now, the body cam footage released showed 2 officers arguing. They first tried to get the girl inside the police car, but she struggled and screamed for her dad. In response, an officer sprayed the child with OC spray so that she would cooperate. Later in the video, the female officer showed speaking to the girl, stating, "This is your last chance, otherwise pepper spray is going into your eyeballs." A little bit later after this, the other officer could be heard saying, "Just spray her at this point." So let's go ahead. If we can roll the video footage of that, please.
You're gonna be fine. Stop.
I got 2 seconds.
I want my dad. I'm not getting in no car till I see my dad. Here, just stop for a second.
I want my dad. Control 47. I'm in.
I want my dad. No. Stop. Don't kick us, dear. Stop! Oh my God!
Stop, dude.
Okay,
Just relax.
okay.
You
Wait, my
done?
mom, she's pregnant.
Are you
though.
done?
My mom
Are you done?
pregnant. Oh yeah, please just
Stop.
let me go. I want my dad.
Stop. You're
Please.
you good?
Give me a
son.
I want.
I know.
For us, sir. Bob's still trying to fight.
Ma'am, hey, get out of the street for me. Get out of the street. Get out of the street for me. Just stand out of the street.
I want my dad. I want my dad. I want my dad.
It might be easier this.
I want my dad.
I got one car out here.
I want my dad. I want
You
my
gotta stop and
dad.
take a breath. You're all right.
Stop.
Can I just see my dad, please? I want my dad. Wait, can I just please get the snow off of me?
I'll get the snow off you.
It's cold.
The car.
You've had your chance.
Get in the car now.
Okay?
Okay.
You've had your chances.
I want
What
my,
are you doing?
I want
What are
my
you
dad.
doing?
I want
Because
my.
you're gonna go to jail now too.
I want my
Have a
dad.
seat,
Wait,
dear.
I just want to see my dad, please.
Get in
For
the
the
car.
last
Stand right
time.
here. Get
I
in the
want
car.
my dad.
Get in the car.
I demand.
I don't care what you demand. Let's go.
I
She's
want.
got her leg underneath my car.
Stop! I want my dad. I want my dad.
Stop or you're gonna get yourself hurt.
Stop! He's hurting me. I want to. Oh my God!
Then get in the car.
Please help somebody. No.
I can't find your dad until you sit back and I can close the door, okay? I will find your dad, so sit back. I promise. Look at me. Look at me. Look at me. Don't look anywhere else. I
Get in
promise.
the car.
Okay?
I'm done telling you. Get
This
in
is
the
it.
car.
This is it, hon. Okay?
Get back in the car
You
then.
gotta sit back.
Too hard.
He won't do it if you sit back. Come on.
What the heck am I doing?
We'll fix them once you sit in the car. Come on.
I want my dad.
Come on. I'm gonna pay for you and I don't want to. So sit back. Then sit back. Come on.
I want my
This is your last chance. Otherwise, pepper spray's going in your eyeballs. Come on, let's go.
Sorry, just keep me safe for a minute.
Come on.
I want my dad.
Come on. I'm gonna go get him. Now sit back. Come on. I will fix it. I will fix it.
If we need to, why don't we separate now?
Let's just sit back.
I want to see my dad.
Come on. Now please sit back. Sit back. Come on. Put your legs in. It's your last chance.
I want my
Last chance. I'm going to go get your dad.
I want my dad.
Come on.
I want to call him.
I will call him. Sit back. Come on. They are losing their patience. Okay?
I want my
Come on.
I want my dad.
Come on. Good job. Come on. You're almost there. Come on.
I want my
Come on. Use
dad.
that
What's
to
her
sit
name?
back. I don't know her name. What's her
Bradstreet, what's her name?
name? Sit back.
Dear, why, you just stop for a second and take a deep breath. Hey,
Please, no.
just stop.
Please. I will get your dad.
No,
Otherwise,
you said that you were gonna pepper spray me. No, please, no, stop.
sit back.
Oh, I got a bad arm.
Just spray her.
No, I have
Just
a
spray
bad
her at this
arm.
point.
Stop. Stop.
Dear,
Stop.
I got her. I
I'm
got
gonna
her.
pepper. Please wipe my eye. Wipe my eye, please.
Unbelievable.
That was difficult to watch.
Just a little bit.
Mm.
Go with it, Shane.
So I understand that they were called for some kind of mental health check or she was suicidal or something. First of all, why are you sending, it looks like there's 6 or 7 of them there, for a 9-year-old girl who's suicidal? What is, that's ridiculous. Why do you need 7 cops to control a 9-year-old girl who is suicidal? You don't. And it looks like they're tormenting her and they're taking pleasure in it in some instances. You can. This is what is wrong with the policing in this country. They think they are above, a lot of them think they're above the law. They can do whatever they want. And in this case, they're tormenting a 9-year-old girl pretty much. So they were not the right people to send for this. I mean, if the 9-year-old girl is suicidal, you would send an ambulance and you would take her somewhere for that. You don't send 7 police officers. It's unnecessary and it's too much.
Okay, there's a couple things that are wrong with this particular scene. Above and beyond the fact that they're tormenting a 9-year-old child. You understand from the background that this is actually a depressed community. I'm not sure exactly why. Yet, where was this at again, Shane?
This was at, go back to the slide. But I believe we're gonna take a look at the slide again. I don't remember where it was at. Let's take a look at the slide and let's see. This was.
You're gonna be fine. You're gonna be fine.
No, I didn't say take a look at the video again. I just want to see where they were at. Do we have? Where did this happen? Okay.
Rochester.
Rochester.
This
Okay.
was Rochester, New York.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, it's not represented by the police that showed up to handle the situation. You take a look at who showed up, Rochester police. I'm not sure what the demographic of the police department actually looks like in relationship to the community around it. However, this looks like a situation where every one of the police I saw in the videos was white. The community definitely looked like is largely made up of minorities. So we're looking at a place where it's over-policed. You have a dominant racial makeup of the police that are policing a community that they don't represent, that's poorly represented. You have a young child that's asking for her father. You're dealing with an awful lot of racial trauma that's associated with this particular view. You know, this is, I'm honestly surprised about how we managed to come up with so many issues and come back to institutional racism in the United States. You know, we were looking at the marijuana laws. We were looking at demographics associated with Biden and who fights most of our wars. Now here we are looking at a situation where our standing army, our law enforcement organizations across the United States continue to police communities here in the United States that they don't appear to be representative of. You know, you have more white people on the police force in Rochester, New York than you do the demographics that are represented in the communities they continually police. So not only are you dealing with a terrified young child who's having family issues, she's calling for her dad. She's looking for someone who represents her demographic, her comfort level, and literally all she's got is a bunch of ghosts. You know, they're continuing to threaten more pepper spray, more damage. She's already in a situation. The optics on this are absolutely astounding that the police officers were even in the law enforcement organization responsible for these police officers ever allowed this situation to develop. You know, you continue to see protests regarding this. You know, this story itself is only 2 days old now? Okay, 2 weeks. Okay. So this story is 2 weeks old at this point. We still have issues going on with demonstrations in Rochester. You know, you're not seeing them on the news, but you have people showing up saying, you know, Rochester Police Department, what's going on? You know, what is the fix for this? Because we continue to see this level of police brutality dominate across the United States in communities. How do we fix it?
I think we could actually look at, there are several examples where you could actually make the police more accountable to people. This is an example I've used a little bit. Look at Camden, New Jersey. They recreated their police. They reimagined it. And the sheriff, I believe, is in control. And the sheriff is directly elected by the people of that community. And it's basically, they're tied to the people. If they're not serving the people can vote them out of that position. And they're more representative of their community. I believe they went through their police officers. They figured out who was racist, who had bad records. They fired all of them, and then they rehired the ones who they thought should be there. and they hired a bunch of new people, and I believe it's under the sheriff now, who was basically elected by that community in order to be in charge of that police department. So they've reimagined it in a way where it's more connected with the community. I think that's a model we could look at in some instances.
Now, that's an interesting context. The reason why is because you're looking at the different sizes of police. Now, here in Idaho, we have our municipal police forces. The municipal police forces answer directly to the mayors and the city councils. Okay, we do have county law enforcement, which we call sheriffs, in much the same way that they're county sheriff all across the United States represent a specific elected official in the senior position. So, like you say, all of our police departments, all of our police forces, should in some way answer directly to the people that they serve. Municipal police through the mayor has a responsibility in order to make sure that the municipal police behave. Okay. Do they on a regular basis? No, they don't. They like to do the point the finger and play the blame game, saying the police are just enforcing laws that were created by the state legislature. True, we pay them to do what they do, but it's, we're not the ones who tell them what they can and can't enforce. Which is interesting as you start looking at the constitutionality of the office of the sheriff. Okay, Constitution, the sheriff is one of the elected officials. They do control. In small communities, they can actually have police departments, municipal police departments disbanded, and the county sheriff take over responsibility for law enforcement in a given municipality. We see that in several small communities across the United States where the communities themselves aren't interested in maintaining a police department. The elected county official, the elected sheriff, then becomes responsible, and they contribute to the county funding of the law enforcement for all of the small communities that exist within the county. I've seen that applied fairly well, fairly effectively. And it's interesting, especially as you look out west in Idaho. Reason why is because we have counties out here that really don't care what the Idaho state legislature laws are. We got laws on the books. County sheriffs look at them and go, yeah, whatever. I'm not enforcing that. We leave it up to the Idaho State Police to enforce interstate drug trafficking. Here I am back to drug trafficking again in the way police handle things. But the thing is when it comes to misrepresented demographics in the United States and the way we police those communities, the broken window concept of policing that dominated, Biden era Congress, Biden era Senate, we continue to see that problem. It's been magnified by the governor, or not the governors, but the mayors of New York City, mayors of San Francisco, many of these mayors that are responsible for very segregated cities. As much as we like to say, we're in a post-racial, you still look at the demographic makeups across New York. You still got the boroughs. You still have segregated communities in those areas. And some of those that are demographically misrepresentative of the state are over-policed and continue to be a problem. And we continue to use, well, from a libertarian perspective, unconstitutional laws in order to maintain that institutional racism that exists in those communities.
We definitely have a long way to go on policing in this country before it actually can work. Because right now there's a lot of issues where things are not working and we're not fixing them. We're just ignoring them, and sometimes doing less. And even when we'll do something, it'll be a very small change, and it won't affect the greater problem as a whole. So, and especially in New York City, the police department in New York State is so big and vast, it's very difficult to control it. You would actually need to go through everybody's record and everybody's cam footage in order to figure out who should actually be there and who shouldn't. And I don't think there's anybody willing to do that.
Well, the thing is in an awful lot of places, especially in New York City, the police union is an extremely strong organization.
Definitely.
Between police union, other law enforcement organizations, district attorney or the prosecuting attorneys association in the state of New York, especially in New York City, despite all of the problems that they have in order to maintain, prison settings, jails, they've reached a point right now where literally minor crimes, and this includes petty burglary, petty, crimes that involve hurting people and stealing people's stuff, have been determined by the state to be petty. So petty that they won't bother arresting people or putting them in prison or in jail or holding them until a situation is determined. Literally, it's a catch and release program. Somebody assaults somebody, book them, release them. They go back out, they assault somebody, they're back in the next night. They've created that cycle, and not just in New York City, but that same cycle exists in other major metro areas across the United States, especially in Southern California. Continue to see that problem, despite the fact that we continue to put people in prison for 10 years for smoking marijuana. Our justice system is broke, folks, 100% broke. And continuing to see issues where we see a largely white police force unnecessarily harassing a minor child of a different demographic just continues to show how broken the system is and how badly it needs overhauled at this point.
And I think those police officers need to be prosecuted. They need to be charged with something, because clearly what they did was it's probably illegal, but they're going to get away with it because they're above the law in our current system.
What's the it's qualified immunity.
Oh, yes.
Don't worry, folks. We got a few senators, we got a few congressmen in the U.S. Congress that have been working on trying to eliminate that. But don't worry, law enforcement unions are going to make sure it sticks around for quite a while longer. Unless you vote different.
Or maybe if we're lucky in 50 years, they'll have the votes to do it. If we're lucky.
Be strong.
Exactly. Definitely.
So, right. So that pretty much covers our hour, Shane. Thank you for having me on the show this evening. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk about these issues.
Definitely.
And a special thank you to our producer who's keeping our slides happening.
Definitely.
Appreciate your help, Mom.
Before we go, I just want to let everybody know the schedule. So this month, our schedule is a little bit wonky. We started a week early, so everybody was off a little bit. I've sent the schedule in the chat to our producer. He's going to bring it up here, and we're going to let everybody know the official schedule now. So, let's bring that up here, and let's take a look. And then I'm also going to link it in the description. So, Leonard, if you could pull up the schedule, I sent it to you through Discord. Okay, so this is our schedule. So we have the KRTD News every Friday of the month. Friday 1, we have Carrie Barber. Friday 2, Madeline Hoffman. Friday 3, Uta Scottsfield. And Friday 4, Joe Evans. That's how it's going to be starting in the next month. So we're going to be back to this is going to be our official schedule starting next month. So for this month, we were a little bit mixed up, but next month we're going to be back on track, everybody.
So we're good. Pay attention out there in YouTube land, KRTD News.
Okay. Thanks so much for coming on today.